Kuramoto model. So please, go ahead.
In this conference, we have discovered a new phenomenon, which is elevator synchronization, right? And I have experience with several people here, with you, with Martin, this elevator synchronization. Okay, so we can make a model of that. Okay, just, well, thank you very much for the introduction by Mario. And thank you, all of you, for being here in this talk, and then for all the weekend in the workshop, which is about, in general, about synchronization. This idea that we go from collective motions to brain dynamics, and then actually, I'm not going to talk on mobile oscillators. I'm not going to talk about brain dynamics. I'm going to talk about, let's say, basic properties of the Kuramoto model, in which, in some sense, it has been used as a kind of a paradigmatic example of synchronization. But then it comes that perhaps synchronization is not all that we should expect from a system of oscillators, and then if this system of oscillators is supposed to be a useful model for explaining what happens in the brain, because the brain actually is, in a normal, healthy state, is far from being synchronized. Then, which are the utility that this type of model can have? I hope that I will convince you in the next slides. Well, synchronization, okay, it's the second talk in these days that I do about this topic. So it's really a paradigmatic example of an emergent property in a complex system. And it has so many different applications, but the idea, mainly from the perspective of complex systems, is that it's something that it's not related to individual properties of the units that form the system, but it's understood as a collective property of the system. It's what we call this emergent property, which perhaps is in the basis of a complex systems as we understand in a general way. Okay, so here I have, again, two short movies. The first one probably is very well known. So is this experiment of these metronomes. And you know that at the end, these metronomes end up of making this motion completely synchronized, even if they start from different initial conditions. But, as I was saying, let's say that if you have systems that have a kind of the dynamical behavior, and then they have some sort of interaction, then the synchronized solution is not only the solution that you could expect. Well, it depends on how are the microscopic rules that you define in your problem, which is the type of state that you will attain. It's also very important to understand that the final stationary state that you get can be also very sensitive to initial conditions. And then you can have a system in which, depending on the initial conditions, you will end up having synchronization, or you can end up having something different from synchronization. Okay, well, so actually, again, so the idea about the application of this model was proposed by Yoshiki Kuramoto in 1975. So perhaps will be a nice occasion for celebrating the 50th anniversary of this model. And so this is the idea. So the idea is very simple, that you have a system which is described by a phase. Then this system has a natural frequency, and this unit is coupled to a number of units, this J, and then the point is that the natural frequencies make that all the oscillators make their own trip, make their own frequency, go around with their own velocity, and the other tries to make all of them together, okay? And then, so you have a kind of a balance, and then the way to measure how close are you to synchronization is this expression here, which defines the order parameter. So this was actually a very nice application from statistical physics at that time, and then because it was describing a phase transition. And of course, if we want to describe a phase transition, we need an order parameter. So actually, it was one of the main contributions was to introduce such a quantity that could describe very well this transition. Okay, so, and then this is the outcome. The outcome is that Actually, there exists in the mean field, in this case, in which you have the all-to-all coupling, that there exists a critical coupling that has this value, and then depending if you are below this value, what you have is that you can imagine that you have your oscillators moving in this unit circle around, that you have a widespread distribution of the phases in this unit circle, and then the contribution to the other parameter is compensated by all of them, and then basically you have another parameter which is very, very close to zero. But on the other hand, if you have all your phases start to being clumped together, then the other parameter, which is the vectorial sum of all these terms, then it will become larger and larger, and eventually approaching this value of 1. That is when you have, we could say, a complete synchronization. Of course, there is something very important here also when talking about in this type of system, that when we talk about synchronization, sometimes we need to relax a little bit this definition of synchronization. Because actually, when we talk about synchronization, what we have in mind is phase synchronization. And then this phase synchronization means that at some point, all the oscillators have exactly the same phase. And then have exactly the same phase, and then they move exactly with the same velocity. But in this case, for instance, that you have here on the right, you don't see that all the oscillators have exactly the same phase. You have some, let's say, distribution of phases. But here, if you look around and then you see how they move, you realize that all of them are moving exactly with the same frequency. So in this case, many times when we talk about synchronization, is just trying to approach this state in which phases can be very close, frequencies are the same, and actually it is this description. But then what happens is that if you increase the coupling, it makes this, let's say, more narrow, and then at the end you can get that all of them, they coincide, phase and frequency, and then the other parameter is identically to 1. Okay, so that's it. So this is about synchronization. And so here, let's say that my contribution here is just to make this question to say, okay, synchronization is not everything that we should expect from this type of system. And actually, the first time that I was questioning this was in this very nice collaboration with Mario and other people back in Sicily a long time ago. And actually here in this model, we realized that you can introduce just in this simple, so this is the Kuramoto model. We have identical oscillators, so because you don't see any label in the frequency, so it means that the frequencies are the same for all of them. And then actually what you see here is this term, alpha, and then alpha, this term has a name. This alpha is called the frustration parameter. Actually, this term was introduced in the mean field Kuramoto model. Actually, was introduced by Kuramoto and Sakaguchi, and it is the reason for which this model is known as the Kuramoto-Sakaguchi model. But they show that even if you have this angle alpha, this frustration parameter, below pi/2, then you will always have also synchronization in the conditions that we know. So there exists a critical value of the coupling that you get this and this. Okay, so for us, this was very nice because just introducing this angle here, so this angle, the reason for which it is called frustration parameter, it comes back from what people know in spin glasses, for instance, when you have positive and negative couplings, and then the system is not able to find a fundamental state, because this fundamental state now doesn't exist. And then the system has to, in some sense, has to explore different configurations until you get into a kind of minima of the potential in the terms that we physicists understand this type of system. Okay, and then actually this is what was happening. So we started with arbitrary initial conditions, and then the system ends up in some, here you have these running configurations, and then you see that even in these three cases, this can be different, but what we can identify is that they move along in a very synchronized way. Not exactly the same phase, but what we identify here in this picture, or in this picture, or in this picture here, is that nodes that are symmetric, then these nodes that are symmetric, but even if they are not connected one to the other, become synchronized. This is something that's the reason for which we call this remote synchronization, in the sense that it was a way to promote synchronization between, let's say, areas, between nodes that are far, but the nice point is that they are, in this case, they are symmetric. Well, And actually, we use this model in order to look at data in the connectome, and then this is the data provided by the group of Mario. And then actually what we realize is that applying this type of dynamics, again, so the Kuramoto model, we don't try to make the real brain dynamics. But in some sense, it can help us to understand some properties of the system we have at hand. Okay, and here what we observe is that these regions, blue and red, which are very close, and then if you look at the evolution of these two systems, you don't see any type of, let's say, of synchronization between these two signals. But if you look at the blue and the red areas, then you see that they are very well synchronized. So this is, unexpectedly, the result that you have, let's say, areas in the brain, which in principle are far enough, but surprisingly, then what you find is that they are, we can say that they are functionally synchronized, so that they form a kind of a functional network in which these two regions are connected. Because this is the interpretation of this synchronization in many of the systems, and many on the brain dynamical models. Okay? And then we were looking at the correlations and actually supporting this hypothesis that how it was related precisely with the symmetry. So actually, I was continuing on this idea, and then actually was the thesis by my PhD student, Gemma Rossell. Excuse me. And then in this thesis, actually, we wanted to exploit this idea that relating the symmetries in the structure to functional properties in the functional network. And here, actually, what we realize is that when you look at the Kuramoto model, and then you look at the individual behavior of the Kuramoto models, then when you have frequencies, you have couplings, you have frustration parameters, and then these three ingredients can be different. So we could say that we have for every single oscillator, we have this, this, and this, which can be different, and then we want to understand perhaps which are the role that every one of these single contributions to the dynamics can play. And actually, it was this idea on the PhD thesis by Gemma, and we were exploiting this, and for instance, we were finding a very nice property, which we were calling functionability. Okay, so you know that physicists, we are very good in naming, so that's, well, no, it's not that. And then this functionability, the idea is, okay, you have a system in which you have frequencies, couplings, and then you have different properties, and then you take a single node. Then you take a single node, and then, of course, you are not in a synchronized state. You are in one of these states in which you don't have synchronization because the frequencies are different, the coupling is different, so you don't expect synchronization. Now you take a single node, and then you take a single node, and then you change the state of this node. And then you expect that the rest of the population will change because it's looking for a slightly different solution, a slightly different pattern of phases that fits into the new conditions, okay? And then actually, so this looks a very complicated expression, but it's only topological expression because it takes into account only the contributions of the Laplacian, the reduced Laplacian, and things like that. And then from the topology, we can infer which are the roles of the different nodes in the network. So, and then this was this idea. So how important is a node in order that when you switch this node, you change slightly this node, then you can change in different parts of the network. Then it was some kind of being predicted that which is the role of these single nodes in the network. Okay, so let's go now to the two very recent contributions that we have done on this topic. And the first one is this contribution in which we work. So with this, Paula was a master student, and then Jordi Soriano is a friend and a colleague at the institute. And then, so Jordi has this very nice culture lab in Barcelona. And then he is always eager to collaborate. And then, so it's great to having him around. Okay, then here, the question that we're posing is, well, let's try to do something which is related to, well, perhaps with brain dynamics in the sense that, as I was saying before, we are playing with the Kuramoto model, we are playing with synchronization, then we say, well, we are going to apply this to the brain. But then we have synchronization. So can we use also the Kuramoto model for showing that there can exist something different from synchronization? Okay, and this was our purpose here. And then the idea is that, first, networks in the brain and many networks in the world, we know that they are modular. And the idea is that we should have something that tries to avoid global synchronization, but tries to keep local synchronization, because this is the key point. So that we need to get this balance between what happens globally and what happens locally. Okay, then, so that's it. So this is we are just, so it's a computer, we're talking about simulations, but we are mimicking this type of construction that Jordi Soriano has in his lab. So actually what we have is this, here we have a collection of modules. So actually what we do is, this corresponds to populations of neurons that have been grown in a particular cell. And then what we know is how, so look, and this is the positions of the cells, and then this is interpreted as how these cells are connected among them. So we have, let's say, usual kind of regular structure, but inside any of these populations, we can have a complex network of neurons here. Well, then we were looking here, and then we try to how to say, to perturb the system in such a way that to put a kind of alarm to say, okay, don't be so synchronized, don't be so synchronized, keep. And then the idea is to introduce something, okay, this is a little bit speculative, that in the neuroscientist literature is called about glias, and so I will not use this word anymore. I will use the word switchers, which for me has a more clear, let's say, physical interpretation. And then our idea was to introduce these switchers. And then what a switcher can do? What a switcher can do is just, so we put some switchers here in the two-dimensional plane, and then what we have is the switcher has some radius of action, and then all the, let's say, communication that the switcher detects in this radius can be managed. Okay, so here are just two different contributions, because this is a very nice probabilistic problem that tells you that if you want to, let's say, to cover some surface with circles, what is more efficient, to use many small circles or less larger circles? Okay, then you can make this problem, and actually what you find is that it's better to have less with more, because what we are trying to do is not covering the surface, but we are trying to cut the connections between the nodes. And then even if you cover exactly the same surface, taking smaller switchers is more efficient than taking larger switches. Well, that's a probabilistic problem, and then we take it like this. So this is the condition that we have with the switchers and the area cover, and then the edges that they can manage. Okay. Okay. So actually, this is the model. So we have the network, the definition, the switchers, and then actually, what the switchers do is that, okay, so the role of the switchers is to come on. So there are some of the axonal connections between because they are long connections between the neurons. So it can detect the synchronized activity along this axon. Okay, then if the switcher detects some very synchronized activity along this axon, then it, let's say, okay, don't kill it, but let's say stop it for working for a while, okay? And then, so we're using this, so if it is the cosinus of the phase difference is above some threshold, then we make this to change. Okay, so, this is, okay, bro, I need this because this is the definition I was talking at the beginning, that we are talking about a global and local. And actually, you will see here a very clear difference between what we define as a global order parameter, which is this one. Yes, this is the global order parameter, which is a sum over all individual oscillators. But this that we call the local order parameter is, you look at the order parameter inside each module, and then you make an average of this local parameter for all the modules. This is very different, because on here you can see that while the local order parameter is high, the global order parameter can be low, because it means that internally you have synchronization, but among the modules, you have no synchronization at all. Okay, so then you can have this behavior, and then so this is the time evolution that we get with the switchers and so, and then actually you see that for the local order parameter is not affected, but as we could expect, so the effect on the global order parameter is serious. And then we can see that actually because of the role of the switchers, then this is the damage that we are causing. Okay, so there are different examples here of this. So remember that this is the structure, that those are the labels that we put on the different modules. So actually what we get is that now we forget about the individual, let's say, neurons that we have inside every cell, and we look at what happens at the module. So we define a phase for the module, and then what we look is how the different modules are correlated among them. And then we can look at this type of heat map, and then we can identify that there is some sort of synchronization, because actually if you look, you see, those are the correlations. So this is the area between the modules 5, 11, 7, and 10. They are synchronized, and then all of these are also synchronized. We have made a reorder of the, in this heat map, we have made a reorder of the cells in order to identify those that are really synchronized. Okay, so, and then actually this is a summary of the picture that we get, that every time that we make the switchers to act, and then they lead the system to some kind of, let's say, state in which you don't have synchronization, the nice point is that you never get exactly the same. So this is the idea that we didn't expect that to get the same. If you get exactly the same, it means that you have, let's say, you can make the interpretation in terms of dynamical systems, that you have a very strong attractor, and then your system will end up always there. But if every time that you make these switches to act, and then you let the system to relax, and then they are acting again, and so, and then every time you get something essentially different, then, but synchronized, because here you can identify the patterns. So this picture, the reason is that these pictures are different is that this picture, it corresponds to the time, and then here we use the reordering the same that here, and then you see there is no correlation between this, and here we take their own optimizing reorder in order to see here the correlations. So you see that correlations here and correlation here are different, and the patterns that we get in one case or the other case are very, very different. So for us here was the interpretation that really if you get in some sort of a stationary pattern, you get a collection of patterns. But actually, this is what you expect in some, of course, in the brain for sure. But of course, I was saying I'm not trying to make any model of the brain. But I think that this can be a nice way making this interference, making these perturbations in the system in order to make the system, well, I think that this is one of the keys, according to also to what Ulrike has been teaching us all these days, that these systems are interesting if you have transitions from different patterns, because life. So if you have a single pattern, so life is very boring, right? Then it's much more exciting if you have different states, and then how you can move from one to the other. And then, of course, but we have to understand very well which are the transitions between these states. Okay, so that's here is a movie, so you can see here. Okay, but we can skip this. Okay, now I will talk about. Well, sorry for me, it's very short of time. How much time do I have, Mario? -2. Okay, so I will try to be very brief here. So this is another contribution that we also did, and now this contribution for me is extremely simple. And then. Let's say I have been working in complex networks for 25 years. Okay, then you see. Okay, now, come on, let's go back to the circle. The most simple, the most simple topology in our terms that you can imagine. And of course, what you expect in a circle is something very boring. So you expect to have everything synchronized, and that's it. But here, what is surprising is that the circle has the property precisely that is very symmetric. And actually, you have seen before that actually the symmetries are the responsibles for making things not so simple as being completely synchronized. Okay, so that's the point. So we have a circle in which we have bidirectional connections, And, okay, links can be positive or negative. This is very important. So we can have positive or negative links. And the important thing here is only if the number of negative links is odd or if it's even. Okay, I can tell you more details, but by now we can skip it. Then you can look at which are the fixed points. And then, so this is very, very simple. So it's just an exercise. And looking at this, then you realize that you have many possible solutions at the stationary state. And then these solutions are what are called, you see here, you can get a state in which all the phase difference between two consecutive oscillators is alpha, okay? This is the difference between two consecutive states. But if the link is positive, it can be alpha. But if the link is negative, it has to be alpha minus pi, okay? Why? Because the negative link is different. So it gives you that the solution that you have in the positive links in the negative link has to be different. Okay, so then what you know is that when you sum all the phase differences along the circle, it has to be a multiple of 2 pi, okay? Simple exercise again. So then at the end, you realize that there is a number here, L, which we call the lag number, which characterizes the state because it tells you how many rounds. So when you move along the circle and then you sum the phase differences, so at the end you have this multiple of 2 pi, which is called, usually it's called the winding number. But we introduce this L because we are taking into account also the negative links. This has been used and proposed in different papers, the winding number, but we introduce this lag number. Okay, and the good point is that not all the values of alpha are possible. Alpha, you can see here, the phase difference is related to this L, but the condition is the cosinus of alpha has to be larger than 0, okay? Well, not all the values of alpha are allowed. What do we get? So then we know which are the solutions. We have checked that these solutions are linearly stable. There are other types of solutions that are linearly unstable. So we have all the, let's say, all the typical menu on this. So what we find, then you see here, this is the number of negative links. You see here that, okay, this is the probability that starting in a random initial condition, your system ends up in being in a given lag number. Look, if the number of of negative links is odd, then you have some distribution. Only lag numbers of, odd lag numbers are allowed, and then in the other way around, if you have an even number, then only even lag numbers are allowed. So this is what makes the condition, which makes sense. Okay, but, so what was surprising for us is that then you get this very nice distribution of sizes of the basins of attraction, because you have many, many basins of attraction, and then what you get is that you can fit very well to this kind of Gaussian, but be careful with the use of Gaussian because it's, let's say, it's a finite Gaussian because you are, and it's a discrete Gaussian because you are taking into account only discrete values of, so it's not so, but in any case, it's, let's say, it's very, very appealing to have just this distribution. Of course, we are not the first in finding this, but what we did is that even if you have a number of negative interactions, you can still get this. And then, of course, this is a way to identify as a function of the number of oscillators. You see, if you increase the number of oscillators, then you see here how the number of stable states increases along this way. So when you are very, very, very few, then you have just a few solutions, but you can go to very large numbers in which then you have many of these solutions in which the basin of attraction is the reasonable size of the basin of attraction of the synchronized state. Because actually this area here is the synchronized state, L equal to 0. But if you go to this case, there is no synchronized state here because the smallest value of L is 1 because we have one negative link. And this makes that our system is not able to synchronize. Okay, next. What was even more surprising here is that when you look at the basins of attraction, then you get this very rough picture. Of course, how can you look at the basins of attraction of this system? The problem of this system is that it's a high-dimensional system. And then, if you want to look at the high-dimensional system, how can you explore this dynamical system? Because, okay, yes, I'm going to browse over all initial conditions. Come on, this is unfeasible. And the only thing that you can do is just making slices of the initial conditions according to different pairs of coordinates and try to find some type of ordering. And I can tell you that take this slice of the initial conditions and you don't find any type of order. And then you can see, well, some of them are fractals. We were using some type of deep learning procedure trying to identify, making a classification, and so it doesn't work. So then our conclusion is that the Bayesians of attraction has a very rough, I don't know if it's fractal or not, I have no idea. But they have a very rough interface, and then the borders between different Bayesians of attraction are very, very difficult to localize. This was, actually, the first that they identified this was in this paper by Steven Strogatz and Jiansang Zhang, and they call it Bayesians with tentacles. So imagine, why they put, so Strogatz is very good putting names, as the swarmallators. And then, then you will see these Bayesians with tentacles. So you look at this, and then you don't see anything. Okay, so this is what we have. We have the Bayesians of, what do we have about, because we want to characterize our system, because now our system, we know, okay, it's not only synchronized, it will end up in some different attractors. We want to identify what happened with these attractors. So what do we have about the attractors is the size, we have the shape, we have the boundaries, and of course, like I was saying before, we have this in an n-1 dimensional space. Remember that not all the faces are independent. Okay, is there any type of organization in these Bayesians of attraction? Well, we will try to find them, and this is a very surprising result. So now you take your system and start with, for instance, with a log number equal to 20. So this means that if you have your system with a log number equal to 20, so you have a phase difference between every single oscillator, which is constant and well-known. What happens is that, okay, we change. This is called the hybrid systems, in which it's an interaction between, you have a continuous system, but you make a discrete perturbation. So actually what we do is change one of let's say, the nature of the inhibitory link, or the nature of the link, we turn that from being positive to being negative. So the state that was at that time now becomes unstable. What happens? So what happens is that it goes to L-1. Now we take the same link and recover the other value. We go to L-2. We make this perturbation L-3. We make this perturbation L-4, until we end up in our system to be completely synchronized just by changing the character of the negative links. Well, I see your faces, so I think that this can be difficult to accept, but you will see now in this picture, and then you will understand it perfectly. Look, so actually we have this difference. You see, the difference between any pair of oscillators is alpha. And now at the end, the difference between any pair of oscillators is alpha prima. It's smaller, because in the initial growth here of the phases, so we make the change here, and then our state that was stable now becomes unstable. Then the phases tends to go apart, and then we can see that here on the top, they squeeze some of them, and here you squeeze the other group of until at the end, you have a distribution of alpha prima. Okay, here the log number is 6, and here the log number is 5. Why? Okay, even if you can think, well, if you sum all over the phases difference, you get exactly the same. No, because this is made, the trick, this is on purpose. Look, this is are not the phases between 0 and 2 pi. It's here we are summing the phase differences in order to see the picture. Whenever you have a hole like this, which is of width more than 2 pi, forget it. It's not there. It's just a fixtures. Okay? Then you see, if we look at how we make this cascade of different perturbations, that this is what we get. So we make this hole in the middle. So we do add the link, remove the link, add the link, remove the link, add the link, remove the link, and then until eventually, okay, it's not here, but eventually, so we are reducing this log number because it has to be interpreted in the proper way, these phase differences, and at the end, we get in the system which is completely synchronized. Well, we don't know which are the shapes, but what we can understand is a little bit about that there is some sort of organization of these states in our n-dimensional initial conditions phase space. We have no idea, so we do know that we have to use more. We need to make perturbations about the different states. It's very sensitive, of course, to the radius and to the direction in which you make the perturbation. This is very, very sensitive. But at least what we have got here is that there is some sort of organization, so that we understand that the basins of attraction that correspond to a Lag number, which is smaller, is inside the basin of attraction of a Lag number which is higher. And so it can make a kind of a onion, and then in this onion you can imagine all these different basins of attraction. Okay, and that's it. So then I go to the conclusions. Sorry for taking more time. And just hoping to having convinced you that non-synchronization can have, well, some applications, and in this case that you can be modeled to be that. And the two examples that I put more emphasis at the end, this of the self-regulation, the switchers and so, and then how in this case the simple topologies, these simple topologies are complex enough in order to the understanding, which are the interplay here between different, let's say, coexistent states, is not so easy. And then actually what we have is that even the simplicity in the description gives rise to this complex intertwine of patterns in this. Okay, and that's it, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks. Thank you, Albert. Is there any question, comment? Hilda.
Thank you, Albert. Very interesting lecture. I want to know something about the experiments that you do with Shorty. The experiments that you do with Shorty. I have seen the setup, how he does.
Yeah.
He has shown it in other conferences. But what I want to know is how you measure that. How do you measure that? I mean, how do you measure the order parameter? Or
In the real experiment.
Sorry?
In the real experiment.
I know that is in the real experiment. That's what I'm asking. How is the experiment? How do you measure that?
Yes.
I mean, because it's not like an EEG in a brain.
No, they measure the bursting of the neurons, and then according to this, if you look at the time that these different burstings appear, then you can measure how.
Sorry?
Yeah.
It's calcium imaging.
Calcium images,
by
yes.
being of a camera, they detect by every pixel
They detect the spiking.
calcium release of the different areas.
Yeah.
And after that, there is a post-processing where you can identify, you identify regions of interest associated generally to each neuron, and then you obtain the kind of average calcium release on time for each neuron. Exactly.
No. This pattern, this is our computer simulations. This is computer simulations with a Kuramoto model. This is not experimental.
But the graph of R is experimental.
No. Everything is numerical. If you want to talk about experiments, I can talk with you, because actually I was working in this last year. It was in Japan with a group with Hideaki Yamamoto, and then they are really doing experiments, and then I can tell you exactly which are the details that they are looking at.
Thank you. Any other question? Ignacio, please.
Also related to the experiments, you mentioned that you have these switchers and distinguish between local and global. And you said that it was more efficient to take smaller circles that would cover the same area. But shouldn't there be an optimum? Because if you start taking smaller and smaller, at some point also local synchronization will fail? Is there an intrinsic length scale?
No, what you want is, okay, we didn't check this about synchronization. Actually, okay, here. So with this, the top is with R equal to 5, and the low is R equal to 15, okay? Then what we measure is that if we have here with 8, you see Here we have the same surface. We need 72 here. We have 8 here, so we have the same surface. But then with r equal to 5, we can control about 2,000 edges, and with r equal to 15, we can control just 1,000. So that's the difference. And then, of course, what you want is that to control more edges. So that's efficient. Well, I don't know if this is a monotonous function. We didn't try, but well, I hope so. So I don't see here any evidence that. But it's a very nice. So actually, we are thinking a lot because it's a very nice problem of topology. It has to do with a problem which is the probability of you have a needle inside a circle. It's a very probabilistic problem.
Thank God. Any other?
I'm coming back to your switching between the different patterns. So whenever you get a new pattern, so you make a perturbation. Have you ever tried to map out, so to say, all the possible perturbations, say for one node, to see how many patterns you can get, and so
no, not really, not really. No, this is a single realization.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was another question.
Thank you for Professor Albert for sharing the self-regulation network. So I mentioned you have a measure about functionality for a single node, about how much it could somehow change a network state. And I also mentioned, noticed that there's a comparison of global synchronization and local synchronization. And the local synchronization is focused on small module. So if it is possible for a more refined research about a node, how much for a node could promote the synchronization or inhibited the synchronization, or is this kind of question meaningful?
Yeah. Okay. In this expression, what we have is, so this expression is an approximation because, let's say, you see this L. This L stands for the Laplacian matrix of the Laplacian matrix associated with the adjacency matrix, and when you see the L with the head, is the L in which you remove is the Laplacian in which you remove one of the nodes, because the Laplacian is a singular matrix and it cannot be inverted. Then you have to reduce the Laplacian in order to be invertible. Actually, this is what we do here. So you see L and then L naught, and then we have to sum over. So this is an exact expression, and then it depends. You can take a single network, and then you see. Okay, you can take a single network, so you have you only need to have is the adjacency matrix, and then you can take a single node, and then for this single node, then you can measure this functionality, and then this gives you exactly which is the effect of changing the parameters in this node on the rest of the network according to the stationary state in which the system is. Because our idea here, imagine that you are in a system in which you have a pattern, and then you have a different, let's say, phases for every single oscillator, okay? Then you can look, so actually you can look in a, for instance, so you have all your phases in these values, okay? You have a kind of white angle in which you have all the phases. Let's say that it's close to synchronization, then you have this. Now, the idea is, if I take node I, what happens with these phases? Now what I see is that this width in which I have all the phases can be drastically reduced. And then I can see, well, this is an important node because just by changing one of its parameters, it can affect the distribution of phases in the network, which actually can be related to these patterns. In principle, this has nothing to do with the modular structure. Of course, that you could use this definition when you have a network that is modular. We could use that, but we didn't, so it was a very different project at that time.
Thank you.
In this case, it's a perturbation of the parameter, yes. Because then changing these parameters, because you are in a kind of stable state, by changing these parameters, you change all the phases, because you are looking for probably the phase state which is closer to this one according to the conditions that you are imposing.
Thank you. Any other question? No? So I think we can thank Albert again. Albert, thank you.
Thank you very much. We're running very late.
Don't worry. We won't have coffee break, so don't worry.